9:05, so I'm going to hit go live on our YouTube stream. And okay, we are now live for another Tech Talks. Thanks for coming, everybody. Today we are going to talk about trying to save time on your feedback. This was a requested topic, and we thought about it for a while, and I thought, well, I think we can probably come up with maybe 3 different techniques or examples that might help people. Because we know feedback is important, right? There's tons of research showing that students respond to feedback. It's a motivator. It does lead to improved outcomes and student growth and performance. But feedback takes a lot of time, right? It's probably one of the more time-consuming parts of being a teacher is ratings and feedback. So we're going to try to come up with a couple examples of things that you could do to somewhat streamline that process. It's not going to make it magically instant or anything like that. It's not going to automate it. And I don't want to automate it because that's part of the reason we have teachers is that human interaction, that human feedback and human experience. But how can we make it a little bit easier? So we're going to show some examples here. Let me share my screen. And we will just jump right into it.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm sitting here looking at a course that has some example things put together. I'm going to start with the easiest ones and then move on to maybe the slightly more complex ones. This very easiest one would probably be the comment library in Canvas assignments in SpeedGrader. So if I go into an assignment, we'll just go into this discussion. It can be a discussion or a quiz, or I think a quiz.
Yeah, I guess anything that you're doing,
anything that's graded, anything that works in SpeedGrader, you can use the comment library in. I'm going to get into SpeedGrader on this assignment. I have a fake student who has not submitted anything yet in here. And normally what I would do in a case like this, it's past the due date. I'm grading this discussion and the student hasn't submitted. I'm going to give them a grade. And then I'm going to write out a big long comment about, we missed you in this week's discussion. I'm sorry you missed it. Oops. Based on my late work policies, you still have another week to turn it in or till the end of the term or whatever. Please do so. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or if I can help with anything. Whatever my spiel is for missing work for students that I would really like to get caught back up. That takes a lot of time, right? That's a lot of work. It's exhausting, especially if you have more than one student in a class who's kind of falling behind. But that's probably the best use case I can think of for using the comment library in Canvas, which is a fairly new feature. I think last summer is when it came out, maybe about a year ago.
Yeah, I can't quite remember, but I see your point. It's like anything that's really consistent, it's going to do a lot of that work for you. Just have it right there and then.
Yeah, so if you're not already familiar with using the comment library, in SpeedGrader, just above where I would add my written feedback, there's a little, looks like a little dialog box. And if I click on that, it shows me a list of all the comments that I've pre-written and added to my library. I can also add comments to my library here. And add it to my library. And the comment library is connected to your account, not to your course. So in any course you're in Canvas as an instructor, you have access to the same comment library. Now, the downside or the limitation of the comment library is I can only use one of these entries at a time. So if I say, great job, and I click on it, it autofills that into my feedback box.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's awesome. That's great. The limitation is I can't then go in and say, great job, but it looks like you're missing some citations. Because if I click on this, it replaces and overrides any other comments that I have in here.
Okay.
It would sure be nice, and it is a highly requested feature to Canvas that we would be able to use the comment library to string multiple pieces together, like building blocks. So you would have a praise comment and a four-banded comment and a whole set of building blocks of feedback that you could click one at a time and string them into a large piece of substantive feedback. Unfortunately, you cannot do that. So that's a limitation. But for this specific use case of the student who's missing an assignment, I do think it's useful for that because I have a nice chunk of feedback here. It looks like you weren't able to participate in this assignment this week. I'm assigning a 0 for now, but as always, this assignment will remain open until the end of the term. I'll update this grade when you're able to complete the assignment. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I try to make it warm and welcoming, but still holding them to a standard and expecting a certain amount of rigor and saying, I'm looking forward to seeing the work that you do turn in when you're ready to do it, and then I will grade it accordingly. But I don't have to write that every single time. It's available in my comment library.
It's situation based, it's not really intentional feedback, because that's what you'd be crafting to the student and the student's response anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Student scored a 0, student scored 100%.
Yeah.
It's the things that are really cut and dry.
Yeah, situational is a good way to put that. Situational comments would be a great use for the comment library. Discrete things that you're going to say over and over again throughout a quarter. That's a great use of the comment library. Again, we hope that eventually Canvas is going to add that extra step into the comment library where you can use more than one piece at a time. That would be great. We did experiment a little bit with maybe doing it this way, where we would do something, submit a comment, and then go back to the comment library and submit another comment. You can do it that way, but a student gets a notification for every single one of those comments, which I don't think is ideal.
Because they might lose the whole message and context and only get one of those individual keywords.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Gotcha.
So like if I gave them 4 pieces of stringed together comment library piece of feedback, and then they don't look at it till tomorrow, they're gonna see the last one first in their notification, on their text messages or their email inbox, however they
You
have.
hope they would click to the assignment, but that might not happen in time.
So
I see what
so
you're saying.
for those reasons, I don't think that's a great solution to
Mm.
do multiple comments in a row.
Yeah.
Because it kind of floods their whatever their notification settings are turned on to. So I don't love that. I'm hoping Canvas will fix that. But in the meantime, for those situational comments, I think this is a huge time saver. So that's an easy one, right? The next step would be using grading rubrics. And looking at our audience here, probably I would be willing to bet that most of you already use grading rubrics to some extent. But grading rubrics are a really great, efficient way of providing detailed, criteria-based feedback without having to type it in every single time. So if you aren't already doing that, maybe consider doing rubrics. And we've done a whole tech talk on rubrics itself, just because there's a lot of little moving parts to that tool. Yeah, a lot of little settings, so we're not going to go into great detail about that. But one thing that I was going to show is, again, in this discussion assignment, if I go to SpeedGrader, I also have a grading rubric attached to this. Let me pull this out so you can see the whole thing more easily. Oh, maybe that's the wrong rubric. Let's look at it.
That also is bound to happen.
Yeah,
when using
it
rubrics.
is, absolutely. So let me find the right rubric and show you that one. There we go. So in this rubric, I did do a couple things differently on this one than I usually do. And now that I've done it, I'm probably gonna start using it in this way. Traditionally, when I've written rubrics, I do it in kind of non-personalized, like specs-based criteria, just saying the assignment demonstrates this and includes this, et cetera, et cetera. But in this case, I tried to rewrite it in second person language. So the rubric says, you displayed an excellent understanding of the required readings and concepts. You integrated outside sources, relevant research, or specific real life applications to support the discussion.
So you kind of switch it, like, I'm totally with it. Yeah, whenever I see a rubric, it's usually very
Kind of
clinical, academic.
Yeah.
But here I'm basically doing two things. I'm making an effective rubric, but also putting in the language that would be like an actual piece of feedback.
Putting it as personal language, which I think is potentially helpful because rubrics are feedback. When a student sees when you use a rubric to grade an assignment in Canvas, students see how they scored on that rubric is part of their grades. They see their grades, they see any written feedback you provide, and they see how they scored on the rubric. So I think in a lot of cases, we can offload a lot of that feedback work onto your rubric. So you don't have to spend a ton of time writing over and over and over again the same pieces of feedback about your assignment criteria. You don't have to keep writing for every single 30 students in your class. Oh, you didn't format this citation in APA format. That can be part of your rubric. So writing quality. Your initial posts and responses were largely free of grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors, but your citations are missing some required elements for APA formatting guidelines. You may want to take another look at the APA citations guideline article linked in the course information Start Here module. So that's another thing you can do with rubrics that I haven't done in the past.
Yeah, indicate where the resources
point them towards additional resources. If you have a particular citation style you want to use, put that in your course information or your Start Here or your week 0 module, and then refer back to it in your rubrics when you are using that as one of your criteria. I did the same thing up here for participation for this discussion. When replying to your peers, make sure that you're contributing to the conversation in a meaningful way. You can refer back to the discussion guidelines page in our course information module. So again, giving them that personal, second person language feedback, telling them how they could develop the next time, because for discussions especially, those happen every week, at least in my class. So I would like them to take this feedback to heart and use it to improve on next week's work, and then refer them to an additional resource if there's one available. I think by being thoughtful about how you craft a rubric in this way, you're still referring to the assignment criteria, but you're doing it in a more personal, student-focused, student-directed way. And then you can spend your actual feedback writing time talking about other things. You don't have to spend it all on the mechanics of their paper or what have you.
Gotcha.
So that's just
I like that switch. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So that's a way to think about using rubrics a little bit more intentionally as a feedback mechanism. And then my third thing, because we're already pushing through this, which is great, is a little assignment tweak that you and I were workshopping last week. And I'm actually really happy with it. And I'm gonna try it in my own classes next time I teach my course, because I think there's a lot of value to it. So I'm gonna go back into my modules. And I'm going to go to an assignment here. And my assignment is pretty standard. This one is, actually, this is an old assignment of mine. It's not tilted or anything. I'm going to rewrite that eventually. But it's an assignment for...
No judgment.
Yeah, I swear, I'm going to do it. So this is an assignment for kind of a mid-process research project.
Gotcha.
Where they're kind of writing their working paper saying how their research has progressed so far, sharing some artifacts.
So it's an outline of assignments.
It's scaffolded as part of a larger project. That's not super relevant in this case though, but that's what this is.
Gotcha.
So I have my normal assignment with my normal requirements and prompts, but then at the bottom of this assignment prompt, I added a note here, and I'm calling it making the most of feedback. And what I say is, along with submitting this assignment, I'd also like you to make a comment answering the following questions. Beyond just the rubric score, would you like to receive additional feedback on this assignment? If yes, would you prefer written feedback or audio feedback? And if yes, is there any specific aspect of the assignment that you would like feedback on? So what I'm telling the student, asking the students to do is, when they get to the paper and they start their assignment, they're going to submit their file. Right, doesn't even matter what I grab. That'll work. I submit the assignment. And then after I do that, where's the spot to do comments? Is it because I'm a test student?
Probably. Maybe go to submission details.
There it is. There it is. I could have sworn that you could also just do it when you're submitting the assignment. I thought I saw that earlier.
We'd have to double check,
Yeah.
but what we could also do is just when you've got that, make a comment, we could
Include
link
some
to
of
the
this.
Canvas instructions
That's
on how
true.
to make a comment on this.
That's true.
Just
Anyway,
in case.
yeah, but so then what I want the students to do is add a comment here and say, yes, I want additional feedback. Something like that. I want them to tell me if they want feedback in the first place, what format they'd like it in, and then what they'd like, specifically what they'd like feedback on. So this is doing a few things all at once, right? There's a metacognitive aspect to this, where we're asking our students to reflect on the work that they produced and saying, what are you unsure about? What do you want me to look at specifically? And either give you some constructive criticism or even just reassurances that you're on the right track. But the other thing, and I think the thing that becomes a time saver, is it's allowing me to focus my efforts where it's most needed. So there are going to be students who will answer this and say, I don't really need more feedback. Just the rubric and the grade is fine. I'm busy. I don't have time to come back and look at it. I don't plan on making another revision. I'd like to just move forward. You know, one of the most frustrating and demotivating things is when you spend a lot of time on feedback and then a student doesn't read it, doesn't take it to heart, and doesn't do anything with it. That feels really frustrating and what's the word I'm looking for? Demoralizing to me as an instructor.
Well, it can like erode your confidence in good feedback, right? You spend all this time building this thing, and then you're like, well, nobody's reading it, so your feedback is shorter and less robust. The students that were benefiting from it
are also now suffering because my heart's not in it. But if I know that the student is saying, yeah, I do want more feedback specifically about this thing, that tells me they're actually going to look at it, right? They're going to, I know that I'm not just throwing it out in the vacuum. So I'm more motivated to spend time on it. Also, by asking them what format they would like it in, that is potentially a time saver as well. I know that some instructors would love to be able to just record a quick audio clip of feedback. And I think that that is a great way to do it. But there's an accessibility concern there, right? We don't necessarily want that to be our default mode of feedback. If a student would either prefer written feedback or has a disability or an accommodation need where they really do need it as written feedback. But if you're giving them the option of asking, then I can say, well, I know Nick likes audio feedback, and that's easier for me to record 30 seconds than to sit down and write it out. So I'm going to give Nick an audio clip. And then the last thing that it does is, again, allows me to focus my efforts where the student feels that they really would like some feedback. So that's saving me time. I feel like this, in combination with a good rubric where you're offloading a lot of the mechanical feedback to the rubric, and then you are focusing in your human written feedback on the areas that the students are concerned about. And I feel like that is a potentially, it's a time saver, but it's also an emotional energy saver, right? I'm not feeling like I'm wasting all this time and nobody's looking at it. The other thing that I would suggest doing if you're going to do this is maybe attach a point to it. So on,
I was going to say, Jennifer just mentioned, like, also I've offered extra credit to students who go back to read and provide a note in that comment window.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, you can do extra credit, or it could be part of, your rubric.
So in this case, on my rubric, that I just have a criteria for that. It's a 10-point assignment, but one of the points is, did you answer the self-check and feedback questions? Yes or no? Just as a very simple point-based motivator to make sure they do it. So that's another way to hopefully get more students to do that. What do we got going on in the chat? I see all kinds of things.
Yeah, so I mean, to the point of us trying to find the comment window in the test student, Jeffrey was saying finding feedback in a browser is not always very easy from the student's point of view. Actually, on the student app, it is much easier, which I find interesting. Yeah, it's just right there. They can kind of like go through and see at the bottom, oh, here's the comments on my assignment. So that means like 50% of your students might be able to find it if they're checking for it. But I think that speaks to, you need instruction somewhere on this process. It's not supernatural. So
in our student Canvas guide, I believe we have a page telling students how to find their grades and their feedback.
We have a page and a recording that I did that I believe is still accurate, though you'll have to contend with my voice.
I'm sure it's great.
Thank you, fishing for compliments. But there's also, Canvas has resources on how to make a comment on an assignment as a student, on a quiz, on whatever.
So it might be,
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, so it might be worthwhile to include links to those things in your course
Yeah,
documents.
that's gonna be an important part of your
But
course.
But I just interrupted you, so what?
Well, maybe the final point on that is, you know, if you're doing a recorded introduction or orientation to your course, this would probably be something you'd want to address in it, like, hey, this is how I do feedback.
Yeah,
You know, maybe even just at the start of the term, I have a quiz that asks what kind of feedback you want, and I put that in the notes column of the grade book.
That would be an
Kind of
option
kicking
too.
that around
Yeah.
with Melanie earlier this week.
Yeah.
Last week.
Yeah.
But either way, you would probably need like some sort of, hey, this is how you do this as a student. This is the expectation. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure I am correctly being or I don't know how you want to word it, but
Yeah.
a good teacher.
yeah. I think that's important.
And then Jennifer was saying, I've done direct feedback from within the quizzes when students choose a correct or incorrect response. That's a really common way of getting feedback. I love that. Until I started seeing my feedback responses on sites like Chegg.
That's frustrating.
That's a whole, oh geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole freaking 2-hour.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, that question by question feedback and quizzes is not easy for students to get to.
And that's another good
There's a
point.
lot of clicks that they have to make to find that stuff. So again, if you were to do that, probably worth including explicit instructions on how to get to it. But that might not be the best bang for your buck in terms of the amount of work you're putting in.
That's probably where I'd have the students correct their own quiz. Because then also every single response is gonna look the same to you as the instructor going through. I can just imagine my brain's kind of spilling out my ears as I do 30, quiz responses that way. So like power to you, Jennifer, that's intense, but seeing the like feedback responses on sites like Chegg, that's where I probably move it and have like some sort of assignment. Hey, go back through and correct your responses and then submit it. And that's its own kind of activity.
Yeah, those ones are automated. The automated feedback on questions that you can do. And when you're setting up a quiz, you can make automated feedback per question, both for incorrect, correct, or just general feedback.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool, but it's a lot of work, and I'm not sure if that's the best return on investment.
Yeah, well said, Jennifer.
Jeffrey had a comment on there. Do you have any advice about helping or encouraging students to read comments embedded inside the rubric? I find that students are reluctant to click through far enough into the rubric to see the embedded comments. So Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is, let me get out of my student preview mode here. Go into SpeedGrader. I don't know if I have those comments enabled on here, but when you're setting, when you're using your rubric, you also have a place to give feedback comments just about that rubric criteria. So you could say, regarding our research and content criteria, I scored you a 2 because this. And so next time, do this. You can do that, but yeah, you're right. That's a couple extra clicks that students have to do to get to that. Again, if that's a method that you're using to provide feedback, you're going to have to give them explicit instructions on how to get to it. And again, I'm not super sure that that's the best way to spend your time compared to just using the rubric and then also using the feedback comments, because the main feedback box, this one is extremely visible to students when they look at their grades. That is front and center. There's no additional clicks. When they see their grades, they also see this feedback comment.
At least in the browser, and then the student view on the app also.
But in terms of how to encourage them to look at that stuff, aside from giving them the instructions, I've also seen some instructors use metacognitive reflection activities at certain points in the course, especially if it's part of a large assignment. You might include a mini reflection assignment saying, I want you to go back and look at all the feedback that I've given you in this place, this place, this place, and then reflect on it. Tell me what stood out to you. What are you not sure of? What do you want clarification on? What are you going to do about the feedback that I've given you? And you make that its own separate graded assignment.
Yeah, they're kind of developing a plan.
Yeah.
You're developing a plan, you're putting intent and value into the feedback. That kind of brings up what Jennifer was saying, was providing extra credit. Like that's another option. Yeah, just giving it some sort of value or swinging back to it at some point. I think that's kind of one of the only ways to like really directly get students involved in it, unless they're already like that super engaged student that's gonna be, they're the ones like knocking down your door during office hours
Right.
anyways, so they're not really the concern here.
Let's see.
Oh, and Jennifer brings up another really, really good point. With 100 students, the time/cost is a struggle to provide effective feedback.
Mhm.
Again, I'm gonna go back to a conversation that this reminds me of between Melanie, Caleb, and I, where it was like, yeah, actually, I think Jared also was in here. If you're finding that you're getting hamstrung by giving feedback and it's making it difficult for you to push through the course and actually like get done with grading, like that's where those weird pinch points where you're like, okay, week 7, that's where I'm super behind. That's probably where you might want to consider having students peer review or grade their peers or grade themselves, some action like that to kind of take the load off. And then you're just kind of double checking what they've done.
Yeah.
Because 9 times out of 10, the student's going to give themselves a lower grade than they probably actually deserve. That's at least what we found with faculty.
They're more likely to underrate themselves than to overrate
Yes,
themselves.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then in that 1 time out of 10, you can say, hey, you know, I don't think this aligns.
Yeah.
This is what I think you got.
But let them do that reflective self-assessment work. Yeah, self-assessments at certain points and on certain assignments, I think are really valuable. Peer reviews and group work potentially are valuable if done correctly, which is a great advertisement for the rest of our tech talks for this quarter.
That was totally my intent.
Yeah, where we will look at some of those kind of best practices about group work, because I am convinced that there is benefit to certain kinds of group projects and group work, but we know for a fact that there are so many pitfalls and potential frustrations about group work that we are going to try to deconstruct those a little bit and then come up with some best practices and some examples in the next couple of TED Talks.
Yeah, that should be a fun one.
Should be, yeah. Well, I'm already out of time, so I'm going to stop the live stream. But well, actually, you know what? I won't stop the live stream. If people have any questions or comments, I don't have anywhere I need to be yet. You're waiting for somebody to attend, so
don't worry about me.
Yeah.
Either way, it's good having you all. Stay with us if you've got some questions that you want to kind of address or comments you want to bat back and forth. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day, and we appreciate you showing up for this topic since it's kind of a spicy one.
Yeah, thank you.
While people either formulate their ideas or sign off.
Wait to see if anybody else